thank you so much for joining us this morning. I will be facilitating this morning's webinar, and Melissa will be providing support with keeping track of questions in the chat box. Please feel free to ask questions throughout our call this morning, and we'll also have time for questions at the end of this call. I also received a question prior to the webinar and just wanted to clarify there are slides for today's session as we do for every call, so please do make sure that you're also joined in the Skype program so you can see the slides being displayed. And as we get started, please don't forget to mute your phone or your computer microphone to improve the audio quality of today's call. And as always, we'll be recording today's webinar, so folks who cannot join us for today's live session can review the content at a later date. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We have a packed agenda for today's call. We'll begin with some updates from one of our national associations, the National Association of Foster Grandparent Program Directors. We'll then transition to highlighting key staffing updates at CNCS. Then we'll move on to topics relevant to the implementation of CNCS's Transformation and Sustainability Plan, including for preparing for transition to the new regional structure, NSCHC enforcement changes, and progress reporting. We'll then close out the call by discussing disaster preparedness, the 9/11 Day of Service, the upcoming National Service 25th Anniversary milestone, and National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. So this morning, we don't have any updates from the Florida Senior Corps Association, but we do have Jocelyn Flagger on the line, who will share a brief update from the National Association of Foster Grandparent Program Directors. Jocelyn, go right ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have some very exciting things happening with NAFGPD. One is that I'm sure I talk a lot about this on these calls, but we do have a listserv where people can post their questions and get answers from everybody around the nation. We're using that right now to talk about recruitment, what people are doing in their own areas regarding recruitment, and people are able to take those ideas and tweak them and apply them locally. So that great listserv, 2 new ideas have been born out of that. One is that we're going to have a specific listserv just to talk about Volunteer Reporter. So if you're a program that uses Volunteer Reporter, and I think a lot of us do, that we have our own discussion group that is available to members to, again, post questions, get ideas about how best to use the software, and so that is a benefit of membership. We have also have an offshoot of the listserv that is a senior companion discussion group. So a lot of the programs we're finding have both FGP and SCP under their umbrellas, and we thought maybe we could do a specific listserv just for SCP discussion groups. So these are just 2 new things that we have implemented and available to members. You can become a member at any time. It is a calendar year membership, but it is definitely worth it. So if you're interested in becoming a member, and again, you don't have to be a foster grandparent program specifically. We have some people that have joined that are RSCP or just SCP. That is allowed. It is fine. The majority of our focus when we go and speak to Congress is on FGP, but you know, we're also intertwined. But please get with me if that's something that interests you, and I can set you up with more information or a membership packet. And that is all I have for my update.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. We greatly appreciate all that you do to represent Florida via the National Association of Foster Grandparent Program Directors. Next, I want to highlight some exciting news from Senior Corps headquarters. After an intensive search and interview process, Director of Senior Corps Debbie Cox-Rausch announced yesterday that Robin Corindo has joined Senior Corps as the department's new Deputy Director. Robin's experience includes service as a Peace Corps volunteer in Namibia, followed by 2 terms of service as an AmeriCorps Vista, first in Houston, Texas, and then a year as a Vista leader in London, Kentucky. Robin then came to the Corporation for National and Community Service in September 2004. Since then, she has served in several CNCS state offices, most recently as the State Program Director in Tennessee and the Acting State Program Director for Kentucky. We are incredibly thrilled to have an experienced leader from our department, the Office of Field Liaison, take on this critical role at the national level. Next, we would like to share an important staffing update from our own office. I will turn over the call to our State Program Director, Billy Lewis. Hi, Billy. We're having
myself.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Okay, perfect. I have 2 mute buttons, one on the laptop and one on the headset. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to join us on this call. Lots of changes coming on the horizon. So one of the biggest changes, obviously, with me being your Florida State Program Director, is that I, as of August 5th, will be transitioning to our headquarters to work with the Office of Regional Operations as a senior advisor on training and knowledge management. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces to this puzzle that we're creating, and I'm privileged to have the honor of being able to support you all still, but at a much different level, to ensure that you all continue to receive excellent technical assistance and quality customer service across the board. It goes without saying that I'm absolutely a Florida girl through and through. I have been extremely proud of the work that you all have accomplished. I feel like we've been on this journey, especially for many of you all. I think I've been in Florida for about 8 years now, and I've been able to watch you all flourish and grow and really help us to embody and accomplish our agency's mission. And nothing has made it easier to do this work and to get up every day and be your champions than really seeing what you all do in the field. You all continue to inspire me. You continue to move me. And you continue to force me and put me in a position to be a champion for, allowing you all to be great, respond to the needs within your community, and making sure that you're adequately resourced, which has always been at the forefront of, my position, at least a part that I felt strongly about in terms of our grantees in Florida. I may be partial by saying this, but I do feel like we are the #1 state. And so, it's bittersweet for me. Florida's home, and you guys are a part of that home. You've been a part of that home for almost a decade now. But I also want to make sure, I want to do right by you in a different way, and ensuring that, even within such great transition within our agency, that you all don't suffer for it, and that you still have good quality people, and that your needs are still being met so that you can meet the needs in the community. So it's not a forever goodbye. Same email, probably same numbers, but I'll just be a little bit further away, and hopefully I get to see you all throughout different opportunities, whether it be a senior corps training, whether it be a trip to Washington that you're making, or a trip back home that I'm making. I would very much love to keep in contact with you all and see how things are going. But I will be transitioning out My colleague, Amika Watson, which you all will have a formal introduction to later on. She's the Georgia State Program Director, also a Florida girl, proud Florida, Agricultural and Mechanical University Rattler, and used to work with the Volunteer Florida, our state commission. She'll be transitioning and helping to manage the Florida portfolio while I am at headquarters. So, again, it's been wonderful. It's been great. And really, I could not have done any of this without you. I would not be doing any of this if it weren't for you all and the work that you do. And just continue to be great and shine in every way and make our state stand out.
Thank you, Billy, for your many years at CNCS and for your leadership at our office during our team's tenure as program officers in the Florida State Office. You will be dearly missed.
Thank you, Marianne.
And with that, I'd like to focus our attention on some of the other changes that are on the horizon over the course of the next year. As you all know, CNCS's current field structure is being replaced by a regional model. Our current department, the Office of Field Liaison, will be replaced by a new department called the Office of Regional Operations. The 9 regions within the Office of Field Operations are pictured here on this slide. The Florida portfolio will be part of the Southeast region, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. This region will also include Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. This region is slated to be staffed in early 2020. We wanted to spend a portion of the call today underscoring the importance of preparing for this transition. It is likely that your new portfolio manager in the Office of Regional Operations will not be your current program officer. About 9 months from now, it is likely that your primary contact person at CNCS will no longer be myself or my other colleagues from the Florida State Office. We wanted to share 3 important steps that you can take to ensure that your project is in a strong position during the ongoing implementation of the Transformation and Sustainability Plan. First, please ensure that your program officer has up-to-date contact information for your project. The key roles are listed here on this slide. This is one of the most important pieces of information that we'll be sharing with the regional office. In addition, Senior Corps recently updated their compliance monitoring document in April 2019. This new version reflects the changes that went into effect this year as a result of the final rule changes. We recommend that projects conduct a self-audit using this tool as a guide to help ensure that they have strong organizational systems and compliant practices at their agency. As always, if you have questions about Senior Corps requirements or regulations, please reach out to your program officer. Finally, as the state office prepares for operational closure, program officers will be completing case notes for transition to the regional model. Please reach out to your program officer if there is information about your program or your sponsoring agency that you would like to have included as part of your grantee file. For instance, a handful of my grantees have indicated that they would like to have one of their grants shifted from an April 1st start date to a July 1st start date if the opportunity were to arise sometime in the future. If there is specific information about your program or agency that you would like your new portfolio manager to be aware of immediately once they assume oversight over your project, please be sure to share this information with your program officer. I wanted to pause here briefly for questions. Melissa, do we have anything in the chat box?
Hey, Marianne. At this time, there's nothing in the chat, but I encourage everyone to put something in the chat if they do have questions. Thank you.
Awesome. And folks should also be able to um, speak over the line. Uh, Everyone's doing a really great job of self-muting themselves, so I think that the audio lines will work as well. But if you're asking a question and I seem not to be acknowledging it, please do use the chat. All right. Well, we will keep on moving. Next, I wanted to spend some time on another topic relevant to CNCS's transformation and sustainability plan, changes regarding National Service Criminal History Check compliance. As you all know, the new NSCHC Guide to Enforcement Action went into effect on July 1st, 2019. I wanted to preface this portion of the presentation by saying that this guide is as new to us in the state office as it is to you all as grantees. In many ways, we're learning alongside you about what these changes mean for Senior Corps. I'll be covering some high-level changes in our presentation today, and I anticipate that I'll be able to answer some of your questions, but others may require referencing the detailed written materials after the call or consulting with the Office of the Chief Risk Officer. Melissa will be helping me to keep track of all the NSCHC questions that are asked during today's call, and we'll be sure to follow up in writing about the topics that you are seeking more clarity about. With that, here are 3 high-level items to keep in mind about this new guide. First, the guide changes CNCS's enforcement action regarding NSCHC noncompliance. This means that CNCS monitoring officials have new guidance about what actions to take if NSCHC noncompliance is detected. However, the guide does not change the legal requirements for the NSCHC. The underlying legislation and regulations governing what checks need to be completed has not changed. And finally, an important note, any NSCHC-related monitoring activities that started prior to July 1st, 2019 will follow the previous disallowance structure. For instance, some of you may have been selected for Iperia testing earlier this year. If this testing began prior to July 1st, any disallowances that may result from that activity will follow the guidance that expired on June 30th, 2019. So one key change to CNCS's enforcement action is that the previously issued NSCHC mitigation matrix has been replaced with an approach called cost-based disallowance. Some of you may remember how CNCS has previously used the $500, $1,000, and $1,500 disallowance structure that was based on the type of noncompliance that was detected. This structure will no longer be used. Instead, for monitoring activity that begins after July 1st, CNCS will be using cost-based disallowance. Now, you may be asking yourself, what exactly does this mean? And as defined in the new enforcement guide, cost-based disallowance refers to the disallowance of costs associated with an eligible individual's work or service during a period of noncompliance. And this includes salary costs, stipend costs, and FICA. In other words, the disallowed cost will be equal to the staff member's salary and FICA or the volunteer's stipend and FICA during the period of noncompliance. You may also be wondering how a monitoring official would determine how much would be disallowed. So during a monitoring activity, after the time period of noncompliance is identified, the grantee would run a payroll or accounting system report to identify the total funds expended on the individual's salary or stipend and FICA. The time range of the report would align with the period of noncompliance. An important note is that in general, the cost of disallowance will not exceed a time period of 6 months. However, if the period of work or service is less than 6 months, or the period of noncompliance is less than 6 months. The cost will be adjusted to coincide with the period of service work or period of noncompliance. Moreover, CNCS may disallow costs for more than 6 months if facts and circumstances support that a different period of disallowance would further CNCS's compliance objectives. Needless to say, this is a significant change from CNCS's most recent approach to NSCHC enforcement. It underscores the high priority that the agency is placing on National Service Criminal History Check compliance. The enforcement guide also outlines a number of actions that CNCS may take in addition to cost-based disallowance when noncompliance is detected. They include the following: required use of CNCS-approved contracts with TrueScreen and FieldPrint, impact on future CNCS awards, a manual hold, restriction of funds, grant suspension, and grant termination. More specific details about enforcement actions are outlined in the enforcement guide. There are a number of resources on the topic of NSCHC enforcement that are available for self-paced review. The CHC enforcement webpage includes a number of relevant documents, including the enforcement guide itself and the procedural guidance, which outlines more details about how enforcement action is to be implemented. In addition, CNCS's Chief Risk Officer outlined the agency's revised enforcement policy for noncompliance with NSCHC requirements on a call with senior corps grantees on June 17, 2019. The Chief Risk Officer also answered questions from the audience. I've included on this slide links to the recording of the call and additional resources in our Litmos system, and I'll include these links in my follow-up message after today's call. I wanted to pause here to review any questions from the audience on this topic. Melissa, do we have anything pending in the chat box?
As of right now, there is nothing in the chat, but once again, I encourage everyone to write in the chat if they would like or ask over the phone.
Great, thank you so much, Melissa. And we also will have a Q&A at the end of the call, so if you're still formulating your question, please feel free to jump back to this topic at the end of the call. Finally, as we prepare to transition to a regional model, our office wanted to reinforce guidance regarding senior corps progress reporting. A common question that we receive is the following: are performance measure requirements cumulative targets over the 3-year grant period, or are they annual targets? The answer is that they are annual targets. Another common question is in progress reports, should project directors report on a cumulative basis over the 3-year grant period? The answer is that no, the reports are not cumulative. Please report within the project period dates listed on the report. And that would be either a 6-month report or the annual 12-month report. If you do have specific questions about annual targets and your senior corps project, please do reach out to your program officer. The remainder of the presentation is dedicated to important items to keep in mind as we move through the second half of 2019. As we all know, hurricane season is upon us. We've all had our fellow Southerners in Louisiana in mind as Hurricane Barry came ashore over the weekend. Our office wanted to take the opportunity to revisit the importance of disaster preparedness in the context of your senior corps project. Because of your connections to local communities and established relationships with older residents, this is Senior Corps' bread and butter, as Billy loves to say, and we expect all projects to be engaged. In terms of preparedness, we encourage Senior Corps projects to contact your local emergency management unit for partnership and training. You can also connect with the State Service Commission, Volunteer Florida, to learn more about CERT training, which stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And we encourage that as many Senior Corps volunteers as possible should complete this CERT training. In the event of a severe incident, we will be reaching out to projects to ensure that we remain in touch as the initial response begins. We will, of course, want to ensure the safety of all of our project directors and check in with you as you all perform safety checks on your volunteers. Other important steps include assessing what resources you need and reporting to us what national resources you have deployed. In the longer term, CNCS leadership or local elected officials may visit the affected area, and we may also explore AmeriCorps Vista as a long-term resource, as a resource for long-term recovery. The 9/11 Day of Service. We are 2 months away from the 18th anniversary of September 11th. As you all know, one of our nation's 2 national days of service is the September 11th National Day of Service and Remembrance. We encourage all of our projects to participate in this national initiative. And here on the slide today is a photo from last year from RSVP of Pinellas County. I think because of the way I sized the photo, it's a little hard to see, but some of the folks are wearing RSVP baseball caps. So as everyone prepares for their service events, we encourage projects to take this opportunity to assess whether or not you have Senior Corps gear or Senior Corps signage to help ensure that photos are well branded with the Senior Corps logo. And this year in September, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of when CNCS and Senior Corps and AmeriCorps all came under one umbrella to strengthen service and volunteering in communities across our country. In honor of this milestone, CNCS is seeking to recognize your work in local communities by telling your service story. To make this call for stories a little easier, our Office of External Affairs has provided a few ideas of what they're looking for. So this could include programs or volunteers who demonstrate creative solutions and or impact, volunteers who have served for 25 years or more, national service as a pathway to opportunity, national service as a, quote, second chance to serve, so for veterans, military, and reentry, communities that show love for Senior Corps, as someone who's serving in Senior Corps and has a grandchild in AmeriCorps, and someone who's serving in Senior Corps with another family member. These are just suggestions, and all stories are welcome. A service story is a great story, and we can't wait to hear yours. Please do send your story with contact information and photos to nationalservice25@cns.gov by August 1st, 2019. And of course, those of us here in the Florida State Office would love to also read the story. So please do CC our office, our fl@cns.gov address, so we can learn about the story as well. And finally, we wanted to highlight that the next semi-annual National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day will be on Saturday, October 26th, 2019. As you all know, contributing to combating our nation's opioid crisis is a key priority for CNCS. We expect all Senior Corps projects to contribute to this effort in some way, whether by sharing information about this campaign with your volunteers in your local community, all the way to hosting a drug take-back event. Thank you all so much again for joining us this morning. I wanted to open up the floor for any other additional comments or questions before we adjourn. So please feel free to unmute your line and type in via the chat box.
Hi, Marianne. We have a question in the chat now from Margaret. In regards to program reporting, if a goal in the 3-year period is met in the second year but not met in the third year, is this performance measure considered as met for the whole grant period or not?
That is a great question. So the targets in your grant are annual targets, and they are also assessed on an annual basis. So if you met the target in the second year of the grant, the performance measure would be considered met in the second year of the grant. If it is not met in the third year of the grant, it is considered not met for the third year of the grant. It is not, and yes, so it is assessed on an annual basis. Thank you for the question.
At this time, there are no other questions in the chat, but feel free to ask a question over the phone.
Sure, I'll wait a little bit in case
Hello?
of, oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is Dawn Whalen. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Dawn?
Great. So, in response to Margaret's question,
Mm-hmm.
when we submitted our outcomes and outputs and goals, I thought that was for the 3-year period. So now you're saying it's for each particular year?
Yes, the requirements that are outlined in the notice of, or the invitations to apply for Senior Corps are annual targets, and the information that is entered into eGrants are annual targets.
Now, is that a change this year, last year, for any specific year?
It's something that we're ensuring that all projects are aware as they're implementing their program this year and reporting on their program this year.
Marion, it's Margaret. See, we've had this discussion for years now.
We have.
And that's why I put the question out there. So my question is then, how unfavorably will we be looked at if in the third year we don't meet that goal, even though we had met it in a previous year? Like, I mean, what is the consequence, I guess, is the word I'm thinking. Because we always thought it was like we could work up to it each year,
That's correct.
even though it was annually based and reported. But like, say for some reason in the third year something comes up in one of your obviously you can explain why it didn't happen, but in your third year something happened, maybe the one agency that was helping you meet that goal falls out and you don't meet it. I mean, you know, what is the outcome? What's going to be the punishment or something for not reaching it in that third year?
Sure. So I definitely don't want to approach it from the perspective of punishment. But
yeah, I can think of a better word, but yeah.
Sure. So when I'm reviewing progress reports, what I'm looking for is I'm trying to understand what's going on at the project, what's working well, what challenges are occurring, and importantly, what can we learn from either of those two outcomes, right? So if the project is really, blowing the roof off of their goals, what's working really well? Is there something that another project could be learning and another part of the state could be learning about what's going on really well, for my portfolio in South Florida, for example? If my project is experiencing a challenge of some kind, whether it's challenges with retaining volunteers, or, a partner agency is no longer reporting data, then, and that's affecting their ability to reach their targets. What I'm looking at for a program officer is, your assessment of, what happened,
Okay.
and what are we going to do next?
Okay.
And what kinds of changes and improvements can we implement to make your program even stronger? So that's my focus. That progress reporting, like, yes, it is a compliance, it is a requirement. We do need to know what's going on with the grant, but that it's not just an activity where we're just counting and reporting things. It's also an opportunity for reflection, for conversation, and identifying how we can further refine and strengthen your project. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, well, and we thank you for at least giving us an answer. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That I guess going forward. And the problem was every time we had a meeting, it would change, or it would be a different answer. You ask a state program officer, and it'd be a different answer than the other state program officer. So that's something we've actually been wrestling with for the past few years. So we appreciate your answer on that.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, it's Billy. I'm sorry. I've been struggling with this headset that's the mute button sticks. So I just want to piggyback off of what Marianne said, and I will not shy away that this has been a point of confusion internally as well as externally, and it's something that we kind of, I want to say, uncovered about a year or so ago, when we were looking at, because we have guidance that we use to review your progress reports, as many of you are aware. Some of you have even had questions about why we've rated your progress reports in a certain way. And then, of course, you all have your guidance that you use to complete your progress reports. And, of course, there have been just some internal conversations regarding how we review your progress reports versus how you're reporting. And then, initially when we started this senior corps journey, numbers were cumulative. And as we moved into recompetition and as we moved into national performance measurements, a lot of changes were made that I don't think were adapted universally. And I think, and I will say apologetically, I don't think transferred well between the way we review and the way you all report. And then just, of course, as to what's being expected. So, I will apologize for that on behalf of the agency, because I do think it has been something that has been confusing for us for some time, not just in Florida, but in other states as I speak with my colleagues. But as of, as where we stand right now in terms of reporting, is that when you are developing your measures, particularly in your renewal application, you're developing measures that you hope to accomplish in the third year, not necessarily by the third year as has been told previously. And that's not to say that year one and year two do not matter. We have to kind of give an opportunity for grantees who are brand new, organization to apply for the grant during a competition and maybe starting up a brand new senior corps grant. It kind of allows them time to ramp up the program, and then that third year, that final year, is really where we're looking to see where you are. We're looking in the first year, we're looking in the second year to make sure that you're on track to meet your targets in that third year. But that's really where, it's going to be very critical. And what I will say, to reiterate what Marianne just said, is the communication is the most important piece in terms of what's going to hurt me, what's going to cause problems for me in the future. I can't guarantee what happens during a competition cycle because NOFAs change, and I have no idea what would be in a future NOFA. I cannot even say what would be in a future IRF. What I can say, if I'm going based off history, is that your communication with us and your future portfolio managers as to why you're having a shortfall, or a hurricane causing issues with a station, or a station pulling out, things that are affecting your major numbers, letting us know that as soon as it happens is really going to be your key to staying on track with us and allowing us to provide you technical assistance and troubleshoot whatever you're dealing with. What I will say is, as we have transitioned again with our performance measures, I think now that we kind of have a rhyme and reason to the numbers in terms of what you're reporting for unduplicated volunteers and outcome-based work plans, I think you all have a lot more flexibility in meeting those numbers than you had in the past. And I tell people, under promise, over deliver. So if your grant is $100,000, which means that you need to have 100 unduplicated volunteers in outcome and or evidence-based work plans, then that is what I would plan for. You can do more. You can absolutely do more. But, in terms of ensuring that, you have realistic numbers that you're able to meet, you want to be conservative. You also want to be competitive. I'm cognizant and I'm sensitive to that need as well, and when you're doing your competition applications, but you want to be competitively conservative. So I absolutely would not do numbers that you've never done before. I wouldn't do numbers that are unrealistic. I would consider the things that could possibly happen. I consider that Florida's disaster prone. I would consider any major shifts with your partners or within your geographic region when developing those numbers during your renewal application. But, even for those folks who are moving to a year 2 or a year 3, there's a lot of shifting that we can do in terms of your performance measures to help you meet those targets. If a station does pull out, but you're able to find another station that could still help you generate those unduplicated numbers, we can work with you on that. But the problem that I have seen in the time that I have been here is that sometimes you guys let us know too late. Sometimes, especially when it comes to VSYs and stipends and whatnot, you let us know too late. And we don't have enough time to push through amendments or work with you and troubleshoot with you how we can get back on track. So your best defense in making sure that you are favorable, whether it's an administrative renewal or a national competition, is going to be, number one, communication with your PO. Let us know what's going on. Let us know when it happens as it happens, not after the fact. And not after you've submitted your progress report, but when it happens, so we can help you if that means an amendment. Particularly for my stipend folks, if you know you are going to shortfall, you think you're going to shortfall, that conversation needs to happen early. And then, of course, moving forward, as you all move into competition and you're trying to stay competitive, I want you to be competitive, but I also want you to be conservative, because I don't want you to lock yourself into a number, and I'm speaking more so from my RSVP, that you will not be able to meet. But I don't want you to undercut yourself because you want to make sure you're going to meet that number. You all have been doing this for many years, many of you. You have an idea what a best and worst case scenario looks like and how to average that out. So again, that communication's key. And then, of course, being conservative or competitively conservative as you're doing your competition applications. And that's how I want you to think about this moving forward.
We do have a few more statements / questions in the chat. Cheryl says, at the Florida Senior Corps Association meeting in January 2018, we were told that the numbers were cumulative over the 3-year period. Because of my understanding that the program projections were for 3 years, if I think I will not meet my numbers, can I write an amendment?
You can absolutely write an amendment. It all depends on what exactly we're amending. So for those of you who are looking, I will say this, just based on what I've seen from the progress reports, part of the, and I won't say it's an issue, it's actually been a benefit, but part of what I've seen in the progress reports is that you all are so used to these really high targets that the targets you set, you typically meet annually instead of over the 3 years. That's what I've been seeing as far as the trend. So for instance, if we're talking about 100 volunteers or tutoring 100 kids, I'm seeing a lot of folks meet those same targets annually or actually exceed them. In some cases, I've seen them exceeded by 3 times. But we can definitely, we can have a conversation with your program officer as to where you are, where you think you'll need to be, We can look at, where your grant cycle is in terms of, are you headed for an administrative renewal? Are you headed for a competition? I know some of that stuff is still kind of up in the air, but we can absolutely have a conversation to see where you are and what we could possibly do to ensure that, you meet your numbers, or at the very least that we document, any deficiencies in meeting numbers or what have you. So for anybody in that boat, or thinks that they're going to be in that boat, thinks that they're not able to meet that number in their third year, we can absolutely have a conversation.
We have another question from Satori Days. Any updates regarding the proposed elimination?
Satori, are you talking about the elimination of the agency?
As of right now, right
Okay,
here.
yes.
Yes, the agency as a whole.
So as you all know, this is a multi-step process, and for those of you who've been around or even been watching, we are operating on CRs for the majority of the year for the past several years. So it started off with the president submitting his budget, where he did call for the elimination of the corporation. But even in some good news, the House submitted their budget in which they called for an increase for the corporation. We're now waiting for the Senate to submit their budget. So this is going to be an ongoing process. To my knowledge, as of what I know right now, I do not believe the Senate's budget has been voted on and passed. So we're kind of in limbo in terms of what the final funding picture will be. I'm guardedly optimistic. We have a lot of bipartisan support, which I will say is very much in part thanks to you all. Part of how folks on the Hill, folks in the White House know what's important and know how to fund is by hearing your story, is by hearing the stories of your volunteers, the stations that you all are working with, the students, the families, the seniors that you all are serving. That's really what drives this process. I can't stress that enough. We have an Office of Government Relations. The Commission has an Office of Government Relations. But really, you all on the ground with your local elected officials, with your senators, with your congressmen, you all are really, the driving force in helping us get that message out, because you're in their districts. And, I kind of like to play devil's advocate sometimes when I talk about funding, because when you consider the sheer number of agencies and the sheer number of line items, right? We're like, needles in haystacks. And if you could think of a bunch of other, pieces of hay being other agencies and other line items. So really it's all about being front and center with those elected officials. It's all about those elected officials knowing who we are, knowing what we do, and understanding the value of our programming and being champions for that. And that starts with education. And so you guys have done an amazing job. There's been a lot of great examples of, how folks are really educating elected officials, inviting them to serve, shadow as an FGP or RSVP volunteer, having roundtable discussions, using MLK Day and 9/11 Day and National Service Recognition Day, and really any day to promote your program. But that's the driving force. I mean, we do a lot, but we can only do so much because you all are our agency. We work here, but the work you do, the positions you serve in, you are CNCS. So you are the best representation of our program to elected officials. So, as we ask for highlights, don't hesitate to send us something, even if you think it's something small. As you have special events that you're planning, let us know. As you have an opportunity to engage elected officials, let us know. We will support you. And, it's vice versa. When we have opportunities to showcase your programs, we will definitely reach out. But that's really our strongest arm in in letting people know the good work and the value proposition of national service, the work that you all do. So I'm guardedly optimistic. We're still waiting on a step. And, I mean, this process could start all over again. So just keep doing what you do and just keep shouting those stories high. Keep letting us know so we can promote. And, you know, like the rest of you, I'm looking forward to another century of national service.
Thank you.
Right now, there are no other questions pending in the chat, but we also encourage people to ask questions over the phone.
Well, with that, just wanted to appreciate Billy one more time, joining us for a final time on one of these bi-monthly calls with the portfolio. We greatly appreciate your leadership, your passion, your insight, and we're very lucky to have had you in our state for as long as that you have been here.
We'll miss you, Billy.
Yeah,
We'll
bye,
miss
Billy.
you.
Thank you, Billy.
I'm going to miss you guys so much. You have no idea. No idea.
Don't forget, we're the best. No.
You are. You are. I got you guys. I love you guys too. Thank you,
Thank you.
Cheryl.
All right. Well, with that, if any other questions, come to mind, please do feel free to reach out to your program officer. We are here to reference and advise you all, and we will be in touch again soon. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you. Great call.